Will Zelensky be the next Kerensky? If you're a student of Russian history, you may know who Alexander Kerensky is, but if you're not, let me briefly tell you who he is. He was the first and only leader of the provisional government in Russia after the February 1917 Russian Revolution. He was anti-Tsarist, but he was not a Bolshevik. And this provisional government was trying to bridge this gap between Tsarism and new liberal democracy. And ultimately, this government collapsed, and Alexander Kerensky fled to France, and then eventually the United States, where he lived for the rest of his life. So again, my question, is Zelensky the next Kerensky? And I compare the two because both of them are or were relatively young when they came into power. Zelensky is 43 right now, meaning that he was about 38 when he became president of Ukraine. And Kerensky was 36 when he was the leader of the provisional government. Both of them were trying to bring stability to a country that was going through chaotic times. Obviously, Kerensky, you just had the Russian Revolution in February. The Czar is kicked out. And now you have this chaos where there's no functioning government, but you're fighting World War I. And so Kerensky was in this position trying to hold all these pieces together. He had a losing war. He had demoralized Russian soldiers fleeing the military. He had the Bolsheviks nipping at his heels, gaining power within Russia. And he had the Tsar's elements who were trying to fight back to get back into power. Here he is in the middle, trying to sort all this out. And I think Zelensky and Kerensky are something of tragic figures in the sense that they're victims of the times and the circumstances. And no matter what they do, they may not have full control of the outcome. Now, when we look at Kerensky back in 1917, he was under pressure by the Allies, the United States, and Great Britain to launch one more attack against Germany. And this attack was called the Kerensky Offensive. And initially, it had some success, but eventually petered out and was repelled. And this sort of was the part of the reason why the army sort of abandoned him and allowed the Bolsheviks to gain more power. The Bolsheviks were on the front lines, spreading propaganda to the soldiers. And again, these soldiers were demoralized. So when they launched its offensive and got crushed, this really helped the Bolsheviks secure support from these soldiers who were done fighting. They've been fighting for years, and they just wanted peace. So Kerensky here was under tremendous pressure. Do I fight this war? Do I listen to the Allies and launch this counteroffensive? Do I sue for peace? What do I do? Well, ultimately, he did launch this offensive. It didn't work out, and it helped to help the Bolsheviks to get more support. And eventually, the Bolsheviks chased him out, and he fled. And so now I look at Zelensky in Ukraine. 2014, you have the overthrow of the government with the help of the United States. People pretend like that is in dispute when we have video of our members of our State Department on the streets in Kiev in support of this overthrow. We have NGOs and George Soros spending money to push groups that want to overthrow the pro-Russian government. And of course, elements of our CIA are involved. And so we have this revolution, the overthrow of this government, with the help of the United States. Now, there's a period before Zelensky comes into power. Eventually he gets elected because people are looking for some sort of something to bring peace, right? And Zelensky appeared at the time to be this unifying candidate that could calm things down, because you have the Azovs down in the Donbass region shelling these two republics down there. They're very right-wing. They're followers of Stepan Bandera. And so this Zelensky guy is supposed to try to unify the country, but he has pressure from the West to become more pro-West. He has these far-right groups down in the southeast of the country. And of course, he has Russia at his border, and they're not happy with the element of Western influence on the country. So what does Zelensky do? Well, he accepts our arms from the United States. He toys with the idea of joining NATO. He wants to join NATO at some point. The United States is dangling it there, saying, hey guys, eventually you can become part of NATO. And he sees the Russians becoming more and more belligerent and unhappy with what he's doing. So what does Zelensky do? And is there anything he can do to prevent what's happening right now in Ukraine, this Ukraine war? And so I say that he's made some decisions that I question, but perhaps no matter who was serving in that position, perhaps this was the fate. There are bigger powers at play, the United States, NATO, and our sort of imperialist attitude. And then there's Russia, who wants to protect its interest and keep the United States and NATO off the border. So perhaps there was nothing he could do. And like Kerensky, he had a chance to maybe stop fighting, right? In April, there was talks of perhaps a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. But then the Prime Minister from England at the time, the UK, Boris Johnson, flew into Kiev. He talked to Zelensky, and that peace deal was scuttled. So perhaps he had a chance to do something where he rejects the West and rejects the West calls to keep pursuing this war. But he didn't. No more peace talks, and now here we are in October with tens of thousands of dead. Is he at fault for this? Is he responsible? Of course he has some responsibility, but again, I think he's a victim of the circumstances around him and powers that are way above him. So like Kerensky, I see a future where Zelensky flees to the United States as Ukraine collapses and ceases to exist as a country. It's sad, it's tragic, but when we look back through history, we can see these examples of people, leaders, stuck in impossible situations where no matter what they do, they're almost completely doomed for failure. So unfortunately, I think Zelensky will be the next Kerensky. Well, that's it for now. If you are new to my channel, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.